All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to tonight's presentation. Like I said, I'm happy to see so many familiar faces and some new ones as well. Tonight, we are joined by Sharon. Brian has lived in Poolesville since 1974. He's an engineer with a PhD in nuclear engineering. And in his free time, he has a passion for model trains. Model railroading since 1980, tonight he will share with us his HO scale layout, which models the Long Island Railroad over 30 years in the making. Reminder, please remain muted during the presentation. You can send any questions you have throughout in the chat. And as always, there will be an opportunity at the end to unmute for a Q&A. If you enjoyed tonight's presentation, make sure to check out our website and register to join us again next week. Without further ado, Brian and Bill, take it away. Shout out Bill for being our camera guy tonight.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. I have my little iPhone here and I'm gonna follow Brian around. I'm gonna introduce you over here to Sharon, who has been with us in Poolesville since 1974.
That's correct.
This isn't the first model railroad you built either.
No, it's actually the third.
Okay, so you did one in the other houses that you lived in Poolesville.
Right.
But you started this one as soon as you got here, pretty much.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, Brian, you want to take us on a tour?
Sure.
Let's go ahead. You want to start with that map over there?
Yes, to start, just so you some background, I'm originally from Long Island. I was born and raised on the North Shore in the area of Greenlawn and Huntington, which is right up around here. And so I was quite familiar with the Long Island Railroad growing up, since the station was about 2 miles from my house. And you could hear the train whistle every time it came into the station.
So what years is this railroad that you've got?
Well, I started modeling the era, which was 1964. And the reason is that is the 1964 was the World's Fair in New York. And the Long Island Railroad changed their paint scheme to what was called the Goodfellow scheme, which has an orange sweep on the engines. So it was a little more colorful, and it's something I remembered as when I was growing up in high school. So I modeled the Port Jefferson branch, which actually runs from Port Jefferson out here all the way in through Hicksville and into a town called Jamaica. And then mostly the Long Island Railroad was a commuter railroad. Namely, it took commuters from the suburbs into New York City. And so the commuters would get off the train at Jamaica and they would do a thing called change at Jamaica, which is what a conductor would usually scream out. And you would get from a steam or later a diesel pulled passenger train and get onto a train that was a third rail electric train. And that would go all the way up and then under the East River to Pennsylvania Station in Manhattan. And the reason you had to have electric trains is you couldn't run steam or diesel through the tunnels because you would asphyxiate everybody. So anyway, that's what I started with. Since then, I've expanded and I've also modeled what's called the Atlantic branch, which is down here, and that runs through Brooklyn. And you'll see some of that.
Okay. So where do you want to start?
But typically we start right here in New York City.
Okay.
Or at least my rendition of it.
Okay.
And this is trying to capture the hustle and bustle of New York. I've got some sound effects here you can hear if you want. So, and there's some fire trucks there, as you can see, with the flashing lights. Quite honestly, when I'm operating trains, these sound effects will drive me crazy, so I usually turn them off.
I noticed you got you've got some signs too.
Yes, there's a company that makes these flashing signs, and you can buy them. I've got about 40 or 50 of these signs actually all over my layout that flash. And then, so what you really see is an elevated subway right here. This was all, it took me about 6 months to build this, all from scratch using just pieces of hobby plastic that you get in a hobby store. All the buildings, again, I had to build from kits and paint them and detail them. Some of them are actually 4 or 5 kits put together so I could make a much bigger building. If you go around the other side, there's a what's called Target Rock Sand and Gravel. And that is a unloading area where gravel or coal, whatever, could be brought in by barges, loaded onto railroad cars, and then taken to various places on Long Island. And Target Rock was an actual company that was on Long Island. I'll explain a little bit why you see these areas for switching, like where those coal cars are. And that is that I belong to an operating group. There's about 7 of us in the group right now. And some of the other members have train layouts as well. And we go to each other's houses on a rotational basis once a week. And we operate trains for about an hour and a half. And when I say operate trains, what people do is they will get an engine, they will get a throttle, and they will get a set of instructions. And they have to take their train with cars, freight cars usually, and go out to different areas. So one person might be told to go to Target Rock, and they'll have some coal cars, some hoppers, and they'll be told, deliver those and pick up the loaded ones. So they'll have to switch when they get here. They'll have to take their engine and uncouple the cars, pull those out, and then push the empty ones in. And then once they get the full ones back on the main line, they'll have to take those around and usually take them to a power plant, which you'll see in a little bit. The whole layout is HO scale, which is 1/87th scale, which means 1 inch in my models here equals 87 inches in real life. You may be familiar with Lionel. That is called O scale, and it is 1/48th scale. And HO actually stands for half O, because it's not quite, but it's almost half the size of an O scale or a Lionel scale. And there are several other scales. There is N scale, which is 1/160th, which is really almost half of HO. And there's even a smaller scale, which is called Z scale, which is 1/220th. And quite honestly, they are very, very small.
Can you run one of the trains for us?
As soon as we get in the other room.
In the other room, okay.
We can run a train.
I like to see the trains run.
So what I've actually tried to model here is a very scaled down version of the East River and a tunnel going under it. If you look underneath, you'll see I've tried to do a cutaway of the Long Island tracks that went under the East River and then over to, did you show the cutaway of the Penn Station on the other side?
Let's take a look at that.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to do was model the underground platforms in Penn Station, and also the mezzanine level, which was the one floor below, and then the Long Island tracks, which were right below the mezzanine level. The mezzanine level had a shopping area and a Long Island ticket office, and I've tried to do a fairly accurate representation of that, and with this cutaway.
That's all under the street.
Right.
Up here.
So you'll have to kind of imagine that there's really buildings on top of all that.
A lot of detail. Boy, there's an awful lot of figures here.
Yeah, my layout has something like, I think I counted at one point about over 2,000 figures. And there is something, I think, like about 800 vehicles on it to try to, again, I want to capture the, kind of the congestion of an urban area.
You've got a garbage truck over there.
And there's some certain things, there's some little tongue-in-cheek stuff. For example, Bill's wife, Jill, is a music major. And so I have Jill's music store here. And as I said, my wife is very big into rat terrier rescue. And she's an officer in an organization called New Ratitude. So I had to have a new Ratitude store with a dog catcher out front. So that's the New York City up in the front room. And then as we go around the back here, this is the original part of the layout that I started back in 1988. And this is the Huntington area. And this area right here is kind of a representation of the town of Huntington, which I was where I was born and raised in that area. Now over here, this is Jamaica, where the passenger trains would come in and they would switch over. These are models of the third rail electric trains that were actually run on the Long Island. This is a P70 double decker. These are P54 called MUs, which are multiple units. And then there's actually a P75 third rail electric. And all of these they will run into Penn Station and stop, and then I can bring them back here. This area right here is Sunnyside Yard. It's a freight yard. And typically when I have an operating session, I will have a yard master here, and they will be making up trains, building trains. They will be told, for example, get the Rock Island gondola here, which is, and there's a number on it, 1207, and it'll say, put that on the train. It'll tell it to get another car. So the yard master will have to have a switch engine like this one, and they will have to go up through these track ladders and pick up cars and then build the train on one of these tracks, put a caboose on the end, and have it ready so when another train comes in, it can uncouple and pick up the new train. Coming around over here, this is Green Lawn area, and this is a model I built, scratch built. Matter of fact, most of the stuff was either scratch built or kind of what's called kit bashed, which means you buy a kit but you modify it. When I was growing up, my dad had a small marina in Huntington Harbor, and so I built this model of the marina that my dad had, which is pretty much the scale. The only thing that I had to do was this part of the thing went out a lot further, but use a little artistic license to shorten it so I had room. And this wasn't the exact setting that it was in. It was on the harbor, but there was not this. The railroad wasn't right there.
So you've even got boats with wake behind them.
Yeah, you can you make this with like a decoupage that you pour on top, and then there's also other material you can buy in model railroad stores that will help make waves and get some texture and everything. And then I just highlight these with some white paint. There's again some more. My wife, when we moved into this house and I was a little skeptical, she said, "Oh, Brian, you got to expand your horizons." And so I had to come up with Kathy's Horizon Shop on the corner right there.
Oh yeah.
And, Dan Ebert, who's on the phone, he's somewhere there. I figured, Dan had to have his bookstore, so there's Dan's bookstores. And then my son,
Somebody's doing some welding in here.
yeah, you can get flashing lights and everything that will simulate welding. My son Dave, when he moved into his house in Damascus, had to replace his garage doors, and they were not a conventional garage door because it was an old house. So he had to actually buy the lumber and build the doors and stuff. And so anyway, I decided he needed a Dave's Garage Door Company right here. And then, of course, Mr. McDonald here, the great fisherman on the river. If you look here, there's Bill's Catfish Emporium.
I'm glad to see I've got something here too. All right.
So, and then down here, there's a farm. And if kids come over and stuff and they want to see, they can make some noise here. I got a cow, a chicken. There's a storm, there's thunder. And of course, when I'm always talking.
So, do you get to see the trains?
Yeah. Let me just do a night scene if I could.
Okay.
The other thing I've done is I've put lights in most of the buildings here. So if I could, you'll bear with me a second. You can see the nighttime scene.
Wow. Yeah, those flashing signs really come out. Okay.
So, Mr. McDonald here is begging me to, I still got a light on here. So, let's run a train. Before I do that, this is not your conventional 12-volt DC, turn up a transformer and the trains go forward. And if you reverse the polarity, they go backwards. This is called digital command control. It's basically, it's sole computer. Actually, if you take a look right over here, on this side, so you can see what controls all the trains. These are monitors. They tell me what the voltage is and the current that is being drawn on each district that I have electrically. Under here are the 3 computer units. I have a master, and then there are 2 boosters. But the way it works is that it puts a 14-volt signal, AC, with a square wave on the tracks. And in each engine, there is an integrated circuit that picks up this digital signal from the tracks. And when you work the throttle, for example, here's a sample throttle. When you give it commands, you only speak to that particular engine. Each engine has an address. So I will say if an engine has a number of, say, 121, I will punch in 121. And that way I'm only speaking digitally to that one engine. So I can have another engine right next to it. And when I tell 121 to go fast, the other engine won't do anything. And they also, now you can get the digital sort. They're called a decoder that you put in the engine. And you can get them either with or without sound. I have most of mine with sound. So we'll run a train here. And the other thing you need to watch is I've got operating flashers and also operating crossing gates. Maybe Bill can show that when a train comes up. I don't know if you can hear the noise. Yeah. Gates go low. What makes the gates go down is there are infrared sensors buried in the tracks. And when the train goes over it, it trips the infrared sensors, and that triggers a circuit which will start the flashers and lower the gates. And then there's infrared sensors in the tracks over here. So when the train goes past, the gates go up.
Now the gates are up. Let's see if I can catch this one over here.
No, those don't work.
Oh,
There's
okay, never mind.
There's a reason for that, because there's a tunnel that goes underneath, and I would have no room for the mechanisms that run the gates. So the only thing that works are the flashes on those.
So this train could theoretically go all the way around to here.
Yes, this train could go all the way around. It could actually go into New York City in the other room, in a big loop.
Oh. Outstanding. Good. You got about 20 minutes or so. So
Okay.
you got a lot
And
more.
the other you might want to see, one of the things I always loved about Long Island was the view on the North Shore. And especially at one place called Crab Meadow Beach. Even though the railroad didn't run close to it, I loved it there. It was beautiful because you could look across Long Island Sound. It was about 9 miles, 10 miles wide there, and you could see the Connecticut shoreline on the other side. And so I actually decided to paint that over there. So that's what it would look like if you were standing on Crab Meadow Beach, looking across Long Island Sound to the Connecticut shoreline.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, wait, there's more, right. This is an icing platform. Again, it's prior to when they had mechanical refrigerated cars, they would have to put ice in the cars to keep the produce cold. And so the cars would go to what's called an icing platform, and they would have ice blocks that would be loaded down into the top of each of these cars. These are called reefers, or refrigerator cars. And that's how they would keep the produce cold while it was being shipped.
It's a different use of that term, reefer.
Yes. And then this is a Pickle Works. There actually was a Stern's Pickle Products on Long Island. They did grow pickles, although they did not have a railroad siding. But it's my railroad, so I wanted a siding there.
Exactly. Exactly.
And these are actually called Pickle Cars. That's what they look like.
You can see the
They
vats
had
inside.
vats, and they would fish the pickles out with these big nets and either put them in the storage vats there. So
Looking at your sign
now,
here too.
yeah, so now we're going to go into what is called the Atlantic branch. This is the latest one. I built this when I retired from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in November of 2015. And so my first question was, what am I going to do with myself? How am I going to stay out of trouble? I also told Kathy, my wife, I said that I knew she was going to get me a new Corvette as a retirement gift, but I was going to save her money. Said instead of her new Corvette, I said, all I want is the back half of the finished side of the basement. And she just looked at me and she said, you weren't getting a new Corvette. And she says, you can have it because I don't go down there. So anyway, I got the back half of the basement and I decided, what do I want to model? And one thing I did want to model was the car float yards. And you'll see those in a minute that are in Long Island City. But this side here, I decided I wanted to model Brooklyn. I was always impressed. I loved Flatbush Avenue, even though I really rarely went down there or whatever, but the buildings and the signs and everything was very colorful. And so I tried to capture that. That was before I even put this elevated subway in. The buildings are pretty typical of what you would see on Flatbush Avenue. And all the signs on the stores actually came off the internet of pictures of signs that were on stores in either Brooklyn or Queens or New York City. What I did is I would just Google New York City storefront signs. You'd be surprised how many you get. I took those, I cropped them, so I got rid of the building and just kept the sign. I then moved them over to a drawing program and I could shrink them down to the actual size I needed for each store. And then I would print them out on glossy photo paper, cut them out. Then I would glue them on a piece of thin styrene plastic and then I could glue them to the front of the building. And all the cars that are on the layout are pretty much set for the era of 1964. I don't think there may be something there from, I think, 66 or something. That's because I thought it was a neat car, but almost all the cars are 1964 or earlier. And then actually in 2019, I really got the desire to put an overhead subway in. And so I backfit, actually retrofit onto right over Flatbush Avenue, this subway system, two cars, two subway trains, which run actually from one end, point to point. They go to the other end and then they will automatically reverse. And then there's, again, there's more stuff on here. This is Broderick Steel. Broderick is one of the guys in our operating group. His last name is Broderick, Tom Broderick. And so I decided I'd make a steel plant because he was actually a steel worker. And then over here is Jenkins Freight, which one of the guys in our group, Tony Jenkins, decided to just give him a freight office. And then again, going around over here, now we're over here on the car float yard side. There's still some more Flatbush Avenue right over in here. And then this is the Long Island City station. I can run passenger trains on this. I have about I think there's about five or six passenger stops.
What gets me is that these figures all seem to be doing something. I mean, it's like, if you took a picture of that day, this is what you might find. You'd look at it and look at different figures. There's somebody with children, somebody looking at his watch. It's all different.
Yeah, there's a lot of, you'd be surprised how much material is available hobby-wise especially in HO scale that you can buy. All these figures with different poses and everything.
I love these cars. They bring me back to that time.
And then most of this stuff, again, I had a custom make. For example, the Ronzoni signs, I got the Ronzoni label off the computer, and I make my own decals on the computer. The Sunshine, same thing. I found those on the internet, and then I just got them. I shrunk them down to the right size, and I can print out on decal paper. So I had that, and then also I made my own cars, the Ronzoni cars. So I have cars that can go to those particular industries. And when we get down here, I actually have, this is a private, I added these recently. These are private passenger cars. If you've ever been down in Rockville, the Rockville metro station, I used to be able to watch from my office. Usually on Friday nights in the afternoon, Amtrak train would come through. It would always be pulling some kind of a classic restored heavyweight passenger car that was usually painted in nice colors that had, it gave it a name and everything. And I decided that'd be a good addition, plus make some extra switching work for passenger operations. And a friend of mine in our group, Bill Demas, gave me this car. He said, "Here, you can use this one." So I got it, I painted it, and I said, well, I'll name it after him. So that's why it says William S. Demas.
Oh, so he has his own car now.
Right.
Oh. I see the New York Skyline off there in the distance.
Yeah, these Skylines, again, these are photos I found on the internet. And I had to find a company there are companies that make backdrops for model railroads. And I found one called Backdrop Junction, which is actually no longer a business. But I talked with the owner and everything, and I said, I got this picture. Can you blow it up for me? And so I found the photos just like the one on the other side. And the first thing I asked him is, I said, when you blow it up, do you get enough, detail? It doesn't blur out or get too pixely. And both of these, the one on the other side as well, were fine. So he blew these up and printed them out for me. And what I did then is I had to cut the sky away. So I actually meticulously, I sat there with an X-Acto blade and cut away the sky. Then I had to spray the back with an adhesive, and then carefully put it up against the masonite backdrop there. And this is the cartload yard down here. And again, this is what they did is there was no real way to get from the mainland, if you're going east, from the mainland onto Long Island, because Manhattan's right there. And they weren't going to run railroad tracks right across the middle of Manhattan. And so originally the Long Island, in order to get goods from the mainland to Long Island and vice versa, for example, the train had to come over and go up the west side of the Hudson River up to Albany, and then cross over the river in Albany, and then come all the way down the east side of the river, and then they could cross over at Hell's Gate which was right around where the tip of the Bronx and Long Island are, and cross over onto Long Island there. That was a 340-mile trip. Trains traveled about 40 miles an hour. So you can see that was over 8 hours. And when you go over 8 hours, you have to have a crew change. So it became very expensive for the railroad to transport freight cars that way. And so what they decided to do was, rather than do that, they would put them on barges in, say, Staten Island or New Jersey, and then have a tugboat. They had a fleet of tugboats. The Long Island Railroad had a fleet of tugboats that would then take these barges and push them across lower New York Harbor, up the East River, and then dock them at what's called the car float yard. And so that's what I tried to model here. These are car floats. They each hold about 6 or 7 cars on each track, and there's 3 tracks. And the tugboat would actually bring these up, and they would dock right here. Now, the reason they were called a float, and you see these cranes, is because obviously New York Harbor is tidal, which means the water goes up and down. So in order to align the tracks from the barge to the mainland, they had to be able to move these bridges up or down a little bit in order to align the rails so the cars could come off. And they would do that by, once they were docked, they would slide these pins in, and that would lock the barge in place. I don't know, Bill, if you can get a picture here. This is a photo of an actual Long Island Railroad tug pushing 2 barges across lower New York Harbor. The next picture is just one I have of a Long Island Railroad tug. Oh, and the last one is actually a photo from the east, standing in the East River, of the barges, and these are the Long Island bridges, car float bridges. And if you take a look from this direction, this is what I've tried to capture looking this way.
I apologize. My Zoom has zoomed and I can't unzoom it. So. Okay.
You might be able to unzoom it if you double tap on it.
Yeah, it's not doing that. That's okay.
And just the last thing is, you just see this backdrop here. This was a little bit of a tricky thing for me. I was concerned when I was building this, and I said, gee, if I'm standing where Bill is looking at the barges, I would be looking north up the East River. But if I was over here standing where I am, looking sort of to my left, I would see the Manhattan skyline. How am I going to do that? So I went on the internet, and God bless it, I found a nice photograph of the Manhattan skyline. And I also found a photograph of the skyline and the 59th Street Bridge, as if one were standing in the middle of the river. And so I got both those pictures. I played with them on my computer so I could scale them to the right scale. And they'd match up. I found a place where they'd sort of align. And then again, I called the guy at Backdrop Junction, and he printed them out for me. And so I made them and I wrapped them around. Now, the only thing I had a trouble with was the water underneath of them didn't match. So what I did is I asked if the guy at Backdrop Junction, if he could print out a negative, or I'm sorry, not a negative, but a reverse image of the 59th Street Bridge picture, which he did. And what I did is I cut the water off of it underneath, and I put it underneath the Manhattan skyline, so it matched up where the 2 pictures butt together. And that kind of, solved that problem. So I think so the industries you see here, like West Chemical, that was actually an industry on Long Island. All these tank cars that say West Chemical, I had to custom paint, and I made the decals and custom decaled them. So they said West Chemical. And I believe there's also a Dugan's bakery. Again, these were not right by the car float yard, but this was a nice place I could put these.
Brian, we are right now at 45 minutes
And
in.
I'm done.
You did a great job. This is perfect timing.
So if anybody has questions.
Yeah, Dottie, you may have gotten some questions for Brian.
The first question I see says, what are the buildings made of?
What are the buildings made of?
Most of them are styrene plastic. I would probably guess all of them. There may be a few that are either wood, or I don't think I have any that are cardboard. So I think I'd probably say most of them are all styrene plastic, and they're again, a lot of them are just kits that you can buy, but I have to modify them. For example, this West Chemical is actually two kits put together.
I see a question that says, would it be possible to make an appointment to see in person? Thanks.
Well, I'm sorry.
Would it be possible to make an appointment to see these in person?
Sure.
He says, sure. I think we'll all say masked.
Yes. So if you're interested in that, you
fine.
can email us and I will pass it along for you.
Great. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. If anybody wants to come see it in person, you're more than welcome. I don't build this just for myself. I like it. My grandson comes down. He loves to he loves to run the trains and stuff. And if anybody else wants to come down and see it, that's great. It's
amazing. I mean, we're looking at what, 30 years of work here?
Yeah, you don't want to ask how much.
Dottie,
The
other
next
questions?
question says, does your layout depict Hicksville?
Does your layout, I'm sorry, say it again, please.
Does your layout depict Hicksville?
Hicksville. Okay.
Not really. I do have, one place where I have a branch going off the main line to New York City. I've actually called it the Hicksville Divide, which is actually the name of a branch on the Long Island called the Hicksville Divide. But no, I don't model Hicksville. Actually, I don't really model in any real one town, exactly. What I've really tried to do is just capture the type of architecture and the like that was on Long Island around that time.
My question would be, how much time do you spend putting it together, like in a week? Like how over those 30 years did you get this far?
Oh, golly. I guess when I first started in '88, I put a fair amount of time down here. Sometimes I would, back I was a lot younger then. My wife will tell you, sometimes I'd be down here till 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning and the like, typically on a weekend. But I'd say, it's maybe an hour or two each day. It's hard to say. Sometimes, I'd spend, if I'm doing some major project, I'll spend 4 or 5 hours down here. Other times I just don't even come down. I did take a break around 1996 after working on this for 8 years. As I tell people, I probably dribbled one too many drops of hot solder on my ankles when I was underneath there soldering wires. And I said, I got to take a break. And so, as Bill will tell you, that's when I started to learn to play the banjo in earnest. And also I started restoring old boats just for giggles. And I did that for about 7 years. And then some guys I knew in model railroading, one of them asked me if I'd have an open house. This was in 2003. And I thought about it and I said, well, I hadn't really messed with the trains for quite a while. And I said, either I got to get back at them or I got to tear them down. So I decided to get back at them. So I picked up again in 2003. I worked on them. Again, it's a hobby. It's like anything, a couple hours here and there. And the like. And then I think it was in 2008, I was asked to have another open house. This is for the National Model Railroad Association, the Potomac Division, which is the Washington area chapter. And at that point, some guys came over and they said, would I be interested in joining their operating group? And I had never operated really. And so I said, sure, I'll try it. And so then I got into operations, and that opened up a whole new thing for me because I realized that my track plans were really not conducive to real railroad operation. For example, you can't switch cars if you have something called a facing point siding, which means that you're coming onto it. You have to be able to back your train in, pull the car out, and then keep going in the same direction. And I didn't have that on a lot of my tracks. So I wound up making a lot of track changes in the other room in order to make it more conducive for the operations.
I can see that's how this is laid out.
So yeah, this is, model railroading is not something you want to get into in a large scale if you've never done it before. I had 2 other layouts, and in both of them, I made a lot of mistakes. And I learned, in the second house, I think took you the one you saw probably. I made the aisles way too narrow. I was very, very anxious. I wanted to get as much model railroading as I could in the basement. Well, I made the aisles too narrow and 2 people couldn't pass. So it was really kind of way too tight. The other thing you have to do is prepare the room. In the other room, I made sure that I painted the basement floor. Just a concrete floor will kick up a lot of dust and the like. And then lighting is very important. You've got to put the lights in ahead of time in the ceiling and everything. So you have the proper lighting. And I didn't do that in the other place. So when I finally got to this one, I kind of picked up and I learned from my mistakes. And the like. And then, as I said, joining an operating group also made me a lot of improvements. The other thing you want to do is maintenance is a real stinker on these things. Rails can get dirty, and you're running the train and all of a sudden it decides to stop. And you question yourself why. Solder joints can break loose and all of a sudden you go to throw a switch and it doesn't throw. And you go, now what? So anyway, as usual, they have their own gremlins and everything, and you try to have to get those cleaned out.
So as you've expanded the size of this, has it been more, you have to spend more of your time just maintaining it?
A little more.
Yeah.
But what I do is I've got myself now where I actually do routine maintenance on it. For example, I have an operating session coming up Tuesday night, and to prepare for it, I've taken all my engines, for example, like this one, and the first thing I do is I clean the wheels. So I make sure the wheels are all clean, there's no grime on them that was picked up and the like. I actually run the trains. I come down and I just run them around the track, okay? I put cars on them and I run them around and I say, okay, make sure everything's running smooth. Make sure nothing falls off the track. I ran a whole bunch of cars that past couple of weeks, and I found some problems. These couplers on them that couple the cars together, they will sometimes stick for no reason. and or there are very little springs in there called knuckle springs. They fall out occasionally. And so if somebody comes over and they want to couple up a car, together, and it may not couple because either the coupler's not moving or the spring is missing. So that's another thing you always have to, kind of monitor, check all the cars, make sure that the couplers all work and everything.
So Dottie, do we have any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, I see a couple more. So one says, when you move again, will the layout go with you or remain with the buyer?
No, I'm going to die here, I think. No, well, actually, Kathy and I talked about it, and our plan is to stay in the house as long as we can. Actually, I mean, all kidding aside, though, I mean, if I did have to take this down, move or something, my guess is I would just take it down. Most of the car, it's really funny, but it's very difficult if you're trying to sell. Nobody really wants to buy a finished layout. The whole fun part of model railroading is building everything. So there are very few people that really want to buy a finished train layout. There was one person in our group that actually passed away about a year ago. And, how do you dispose of a huge layout with all this stuff? There are companies out there that will buy it from you. They're certainly not going to give you top dollar, but they will buy all your stuff, your cars and everything. Buildings some of the buildings can go. All the track probably will have to be thrown away, and the like. So it's not something that you just move. There are people that build layouts that are transportable. They build them in modules so they can be lifted up and carried out, maybe in about a 2-foot by 4-foot section, and they can plug together. But not this one.
What's another question here, Dottie?
Then the last question I see says, can you go into nighttime lighting mode again?
Can you go into nighttime lighting mode? Does this have it too?
Sure, I can do it on this one here.
Okay.
And if we have any other questions in the meantime, feel free to either send them in the chat or unmute and ask yourself.
Brian's going to turn out the lights and we'll get to see what downtown Brooklyn looks like. While Brian fixes the lights, I'm going to mention something else. He mentioned that he plays banjo, picked up the banjo back in 1996, and he is still playing that. And I'll put a plug in. If you would like to meet Brian and see him play the banjo, come on Foolsville Day in the morning to Locals, and our group Touch of Gray will be playing there, and Brian will be playing the banjo. Turn the light out behind you.
Huh?
Or let me look from this direction. That's okay.
Turn on. Let's
see the light with the cafe on it.
Yeah, that area is not lighting up. I don't know what's wrong with it.
That's figure it out.
But I can do the other room again, but this is
sure. Okay, well.
And the last thing they got to see, obviously, is.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you can see the Brooklyn sign there.
Right in there.
I don't know if they can get there. See that. Forget about it.
We've got a nice Chinese restaurant there. Okay. Well, Brian, I can't thank you enough for spending your evening with us, showing us all this stuff. Oh, I lost him. Can't thank you enough for spending your evening with us, Brian, and showing us this terrific layout. When I first mentioned this, Brian said, well, why don't you just have people come over? And I said, we're going to have a lot more people than we could fit down here. So now that the invitation is out there, Dottie, you can send Brian some information. And
yeah, if anybody wants to come over and see it, just go. I'm retired. I'm here. So just give a call or send me an email or whatever, and we'll just make a time when you can stop by and wander around and look at everything.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah,
Dottie,
that's such a cool offer, and thank you so much for sharing your layout with us tonight. It's so impressive and so fascinating to see all the detail that went into it and all the hard work. It's so clear, and it's really amazing. And yeah, what a generous offer to say that people could email us and come over and see it in person. So if you are interested in that, just email info@poolsvilleseniors.org and I'll pass it along for you. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I hope you learned something new and enjoyed tonight's presentation as much as I did. Of course, if you think of any questions later, you can also email us at info@poolsvilleseniors.org and I can pass them along. If you'd like to unmute or turn on your camera to say goodbye, now is the time. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live, please leave a like and a comment. We'd like to thank Brian for this presentation, and also thank you, Bill, for being our cameraman tonight, as well as our ongoing sponsors and private contributors that help us keep our programs going because we love putting them on for you. If you enjoyed tonight's program, please consider joining us for more upcoming events. This time next week, we'll be back with Kenny Scholes and his historic property lectures. You can go to our website, poolsvilleseniors.org, for more info and registration. And thank you all so much for attending.
Thanks, Brian.
Brian, that's great.
Brian.